I used to laugh at the idea of manifestation. People said it worked, that you could dream something into reality just by believing in it, just by holding it in your heart long enough, and I always thought it was nonsense. My life had always been a string of disappointments, of things that never worked out the way I wanted them to. Jobs slipped through my fingers, relationships ended before they began. Money disappeared as quickly as it came. I thought life was just unfair, and some people were lucky while the rest of us had to accept the scraps. But then something happened, something that made me change the way I looked at everything. It began on a night I'll never forget. I had just lost another job, the kind of job I thought would finally stabilize my life. I was angry, bitter, and tired of constantly falling short. That night, I sat on my bed in the small, dimly lit apartment I could barely afford, staring at the cracks on the ceiling as tears burned in my eyes. For the first time in my life, I whispered into the quiet room, "There has to be more than this. There has to be a way to change." Those words echoed in my mind long after I spoke them. And then, almost like an answer, I remembered something my grandmother used to tell me when I was little. She'd say, "The world listens when you speak with faith. Your thoughts are seeds. Plant them carefully." At the time, I thought it was just one of those comforting things old people say, but that night it returned to me like a forgotten treasure. I picked up a notebook lying on the floor, ripped at the edges, almost out of pages, and I wrote. I wrote the kind of life I wanted, not the one I had. I wrote that I wanted a job where I felt valued, a home that felt safe, enough money not to live in fear, and love the kind that stayed. I didn't stop until I had filled the page with every detail I could imagine. Then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I read it out loud. I spoke it into the empty room as if someone was listening. And when I finished, I felt lighter, as if I had laid down a burden I had been carrying for years. The next morning, nothing had changed. My problems were still there, but something inside me had shifted. Instead of focusing on what was wrong, I carried those words with me like a quiet flame. I acted like the life I had written was already mine. When I woke up, I said thank you for the job I didn't yet have, the home I didn't yet own, the love I hadn't yet found. It felt strange at first, almost like lying to myself. But the more I did it, the more natural it became. Weeks went by, and slowly, I began to notice small changes. One afternoon, as I walked past a coffee shop I had visited countless times, I noticed a "Help Wanted" sign in the window. Normally, I would have dismissed it, thinking it was beneath me or not worth the effort, but something told me to go inside. I filled out an application, and to my surprise, I was hired on the spot. It wasn't my dream job, but it was a step, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. The more I leaned into this strange practice of manifestation, the more doors began to open. I wrote down my goals every night. I thanked the universe, God, or whatever force might be listening, for things that hadn't yet appeared in my life. I visualized walking into a beautiful home, running my hands along the walls, placing furniture where I wanted it, and smelling the fresh paint. I saw myself in love, laughing with someone who truly understood me, feeling safe in their embrace. And then, things began to happen. Slowly at first, like the universe was testing me. A raise at the coffee shop, a chance encounter with someone who would later become a mentor, a new opportunity that seemed to fall right into my lap. With every blessing, I doubled down on gratitude. I started to believe, truly believe, that manifestation was more than just wishful thinking, it was alignment. There were setbacks, of course. times when things fell apart, when I questioned if I was wasting my time. But each time I wanted to give up, I reminded myself of the night I had first spoken my desires out loud. I remembered how broken I had felt then, and how much lighter I had become just by shifting my focus. And I pushed forward. Months later, I found myself holding the keys to a small but beautiful house. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. As I stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows, I cried not because I had finally gotten what I wanted, but because I realized that I had created it. By focusing on what I desired instead of what I lacked, I had drawn it into my life. The love came too, in the most unexpected way. At the coffee shop, I met someone who came in every morning, always ordering the same thing. We started talking, casually at first, then deeper. They listened when I spoke, really listened, in a way I had never experienced before. One evening, we walked together under the fading sun, and I realized I had manifested more than just love. I had manifested partnership, trust, and friendship. Years have passed since that night in my old apartment, but I still practice manifestation every day. Not because I believe it's magic, but because I know the power of shifting my focus from fear to faith, from lack to abundance. I learned that manifestation isn't just about getting what you want, it's about becoming the person who believes they are worthy of receiving it. When people ask me if I really believe in manifestation, I tell them this. I used to be a skeptic. I used to think life was about luck, that some people were chosen while others were forgotten. But now, I know better. I know that our thoughts shape our reality, that gratitude attracts more to be grateful for, and that faith, even the size of a mustard seed, can move mountains. So yes, I believe. Because I've lived it. Because I've walked through the fire of despair and come out holding the life I once only
dreamed of. And all it took was one broken night, one desperate whisper, and one decision to start believing in something bigger than my fear. And every time I look around my home, every time I sit across the table from the person I love, every time I feel peace instead of panic, I whisper the same words I did that first night. Thank you. Because I now know that the power of manifestation is real, not because it handed me a perfect life, but because it gave me the strength to believe in one and the courage to create it.